Speed Fix. In this video, I want to talk about 504 gateway errors and some troubleshooting tips, troubleshooting steps, and how to fix them. So let's talk about what a 504 error is essentially. So generally it means that the server is out of resources, so it's overloaded. So the browser sent a request to the server and it didn't come back in time with a response. If using Cloudflare, this will also appear as a 524 error. So 504 and 524 are essentially the same errors. There are a few things that typically cause of 504 errors. It should say 504 errors. Let's talk about them. So what causes 504 is an aggressive web crawler. So if you have an aggressive web crawler that is hammering the site, Pinterest is a good example of a genuine crawler that is too aggressive. Other crawlers like SEO tools like SEMrush and Ahrefs can be extremely aggressive. So they may just be crawling the site aggressively, but they may also be crawling the site with query strings and hammering the site. So there's a few different ways to deal with that. We talked about, and particularly you'll get that on a WooCommerce site, and I'll just show you. We talked about it in a different video, a robots.txt file for WooCommerce. So this video is worth a watch if you have a WooCommerce site. It talks about a robots.txt file that will help block some of this crawling of aggressive query strings. So commonly in a WooCommerce site, a crawler will come along and add and remove things to the cart aggressively, chewing up all the PHP workers and causing 504 errors. So let's talk about PHP workers before we go through this list. So PHP is the programming language that WordPress runs on, and the hosting gives you a certain number of workers. So they're PHP instances that do stuff. So basically, in PHP land, each worker can only use 100% of one CPU core. So if you say have 10 workers and you have 5 CPU cores or 500% CPUs, then basically you have 2 workers per core. So typically 10 to 20 workers is probably where you want to be at if you have 5 cores. It's kind of a bit of an art getting it right. It depends on what type of site you have, but you probably don't want to go over 2 or 3 workers per core, because then you'll start to get other errors with memory, but we'll talk about that in a different video. But basically, each worker can only use 1 CPU core. If you have a crawler coming along loading up hundreds of pages per minute, it will use up all those workers because they're trying to generate those pages, especially if they have query strings. Query strings typically are not cached, and if things are adding and removing things to the cart in a WooCommerce site, for example, that's using a lot of processing, and it's going to chew up a lot of resources, and you're going to get 504 errors intermittently. So aggressive crawlers, actually, you will also have kind of negative SEO attacks, or attackers crawling strange things as well can also cause this. Brute force attacks, so just basically trying to hammer the WordPress login with password attempts, and that can chew up the workers as well, especially on a smaller site if you don't have any. And just for reference here, a typical WordPress site gets 1,000 to 10,000 brute force attacks a day. And they don't happen spread out. They can happen in a very short period of time. So that could be the issue. You could have a plugin that has an error or it's chewing excessive resources. So that may be an issue. You may also have database issues. So you may also have a very fat database. We do have a video as well somewhere here on our YouTube channel about WordPress database optimization. If you just search for that, search database, you'll find it. And we talk about that, how to optimize your WordPress database. We talk about that in more detail, but excessive resources by plugins or database, that can be a problem. Genuine high loads, so you just got a lot of traffic. No page caching or page caching not working. This is probably one of the more common ones, as well as this aggressive crawling. Excessive 404 errors, if you have a lot of traffic and you have something in your theme or template that is generating a 404 error, then that could be a problem as well, because that 404 error is usually often handled by PHP, so you get that same scenario where you're chewing a bunch of PHP workers. And then PHP timeout set far too high, so you've chewed up all the workers. They're all busy, and they're running for minutes at a time, and they shouldn't be. So let's talk about troubleshooting these things. A simple one, I'd start with checking the page caching, making sure it's working. We typically recommend WP Rocket, so wprocketplugin.com for page caching, and almost all caching plugins will add stuff to the htaccess file if they are working. So you may have the plugin enabled and somehow the code got removed from the htaccess file, or it might just not be enabled. So just check the htaccess file. You'll typically have this default WordPress stuff in here, but you should have a whole bunch of other stuff there too. In this case, the plugin is actually not enabled. So if I go and enable WP Rocket, we'll just do that, and then we'll load that htaccess file up again. We should see a whole bunch of stuff in there. Now, if you have the plugin already enabled, you sometimes maybe just have to go and save the settings again. So just go in here and just hit save, and that'll reapply the changes. So if something happened and that code got removed, that'll fix it. So you can see here now we have the WP Rocket code. So make sure you have a page caching plugin. If you don't have one, go and get one. So wprocketplugin.com is who we recommend. So we've got wprocketplugin.com. So this is who we recommend. It's pretty cheap. It's $50 a year, something like that. $59 a year, well worth it. And if you do have a caching plugin, make sure there is stuff in the htaccess file. And if not, disable and enable the plugin, or just hit save in there again, and then you should be seeing that code. So I'll leave that one. That one's pretty straightforward. Checking server logs. So server logs are usually split into access logs, error logs, and then there's probably a separate error log for PHP. I'll show you here. Oops. So here you'll see, you usually find a logs folder. This is on our WP Alpha platform, but yours might be somewhat different. But you'll see here, the access logs are usually access SSL. It'll say something like that. It'll be different on each host. So this is the Apache log. So if I open that up, it'll show me all the accesses to the site. It'll look something like this. It might be a bit messy like that, hard to read, and often it's easier to download it and open it in a text browser. But you'll see here, if I search Google, you'll see here's some Google crawlers. Let's just see, give you an example here. Okay, so here we have Googlebot crawling the site. So you'll see, it's getting, so there's a 404 error Googlebot got, but that's Google crawling the site. But you'll see here, I'll just go back here, there is a timestamp here. So if you see aggressive crawling, you can see here this is uptime monitoring. But if you see aggressive crawling where it's getting multiple requests per second, that may be an issue. You can see here this is a crawler pedal search, pedalbot. This is not a great crawler, and this one can be aggressive too. But basically we want to go through here and find unusual traffic patterns. So a lot of load from something. You see here is Open Site Explorer. That's SEO Moz's bot. So you'll see all the bots and things coming in here. So basically you want to look for something unusual, a lot of traffic from something, loading up weird URLs that don't exist, add to carts, remove to carts. What else? Attacks, so accessing the login page. So basically we want to go through these logs and find issues or something that stands out. And just see if we can find one here. Let's have a look at the error log. Let's do that one. See if there's anything weird. It's not really useful for us here. Let's have a look. And this one, this hosting has both Apache and Nginx. So you see there's proxy access logs. So there's actually 2 logs for access. It's just this hosting. Let's see. Okay, so here we go. Here's some cart URLs. So that's WP Rocket trying to access the cart. Let's just see. Add to cart. That's not unusual. Okay, that's not weird. I don't really have anything to show you here that's too strange. Let's see. Yeah, it's all fairly normal looking. Okay, this is not a very busy site, so it's not a great example for this. But basically, we just want to go through and find issues and errors in there. So like I said here, unusual traffic patterns, aggressive bots, or unusual query strings. So query strings in general are not cached. So that is effectively the same as having no page caching. So just keep that in mind. In terms of how we fix it, there's a few ways we can do this. So we can block bots in Cloudflare. If you search WP Speed Fix Cloudflare rules, can't type properly. We have a post on this, Cloudflare firewall rules for WordPress. And you'll see here we have a rule: block brute force attacks and block SEO crawlers. So this one is SEO crawlers. So these are the crawlers that we typically block: SEMrush, Ahrefs, OpenSiteMoz.bot is another one. So these guys are super aggressive, so we can block them there in Cloudflare. So that's one way to do it. Let's just talk about brute force for a second. We can block brute force attacks in Cloudflare. Let's just go here 1 second, block brute force attacks. So there's the rule there. So this one we want to block, we want to filter traffic, so we're challenging it, so it's like a captured thing. And you would have seen this error before. You go to a website that says checking your security, something like that. That's this kind of Cloudflare setup. So what we want to do is filter the WP login URL and outside of Australia, because this is, in this example, it's an Australian site. So anybody outside Australia trying to access the login page will get filtered. So that's how we do brute force attacks. Let's see. So we did that one, brute force attacks. Blocking in robots.txt, and we talked about that. There is an article there. There's a video there. Robots.txt for WooCommerce, but this can be used for any site, and there is actually a link there, and I'll link it in the show notes of this one or description. There is a link to a sample robots.txt file on our website for WooCommerce, and we also have a link here, and I'll put it in the description here. This is an example robots.txt file to block lots of bad bots. So I'll just put that here as an example. And I'll put these notes in the description so you can grab them. Okay, filtering traffic outside your target country. So they have an example for that too in Cloudflare, as you can see here. Let's see if we can open up this image if it's big enough. Okay, so we're filtering traffic essentially outside North America. And we don't want to filter known bots, so known bots off. We don't want to exclude this path. This is for SSL certificates, and we don't want to block any uptime monitors. So you can see what this does. Any traffic that is essentially human or an unknown bot outside Canada and the US, we want to run it through that challenge or filter again as well. So that's what that is, filtering traffic outside our target country. Generally, we don't want to block that traffic. We want to filter it. So filtering it's a better idea, because there is going to be a percentage of people that are genuine that are accessing the site outside the country. So we never want to block countries outright. And we certainly don't want to block like genuine bots like Google, because that's going to mess up your SEO. What else? Using a plugin like WordFence. So typically we'd recommend the free version of WordPress. Very good. It will block most garbage hitting the site, and it will block WordPress specific attacks as well, and just weird traffic patterns. So that's worth setting up and installing as well. People talk about WordFence adding more load to the website. It's a net positive. The stuff it filters will more than offset the load, the tiny amount of additional load it adds to your site. Large number of 404s. So this can also hurt as well if you have a typo or some problem in your theme file and every page has a 404 on it. This can also chew up the PHP workers as well and start causing 504 errors in some circumstances. So fixing 404 errors using probably an SEO audit tool would be the way to go there. If you want to do a quick scan, you can use our free speed test here. So if you go to our website, free stuff, WordPress speed test, and just use the test here, and we'll let this go while we're doing the video. It'll take 90 seconds. There's no opt-in required. And it'll start a test, so we'll come back to that in a minute. But it'll pick up 404 errors and any other weird stuff as well. So that's an easy way to check for that, at least on the homepage. So that kind of covers the crawling stuff. So server logs, looking for unusual traffic patterns, and then block it, filter it, fix it, whatever needs to happen. I'd also say add query strings that should be cached to your caching plugin. So if you've got a WooCommerce site that has a lot of searches, for example, or filters, you might want to cache those filters. So that might be something that will help too in your situation. Turning on WordPress debugging. So this is an easy way to kind of troubleshoot plugins that are problematic or causing issues. Let's look at how to turn on debugging. So wp config, turn on WordPress debugging. There are some lines in the wp config file. Let's just have a look at the WordPress site here. So you want to turn on debugging. So add these lines to wp config, wp debug true. You want the log on here, and you want this one display errors false. So what that will do error logging to this file here in WP content debug.log. So that'll also help you troubleshoot issues where it's a plugin chewing excessive resources or some sort of error. Similarly, using the plugin Query Monitor can be a good way to troubleshoot plugins and errors. So Query Monitor plugin, this is free. Once you install it, it adds this thing to the top of the website, the toolbar like this, and it will give you warnings and errors and things like that. So errors and warnings are going to cause things to be slow. So if you have a lot of errors, a lot of warnings, or this time is very high, this page generation time is very high, that could also be the problem as well. So using that to troubleshoot issues. What else do we say? PHP timeout too high. Let's just look at that for a second. We don't have it in the list here, but in PHP, so PHP is the programming language WordPress runs on, and every hosting will have some PHP configuration. And you'll have these settings, maximum execution time and maximum input time. These you don't want to have these too high. So if you have these at, quite often they're like 300 seconds, so 5 minutes. Sometimes we see it 3,000 seconds. This is too long. And what happens is a worker starts running or it gets out of control, and then it just keeps running forever. And then more workers start to do that. And in the end, you have no workers left. So 30 seconds, 60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, 120 seconds would be the maximum you ought to run these for. So what happens that once it gets to that limit, the hosting basically kills the worker and starts it again. So if the workers are running for more than 30 or 60 seconds, there's probably something wrong there. There are some exceptions if you're running some big imports, or you have a job that's running really long, that may require that number to be really high temporarily. But as a general rule, we wouldn't run the site with that at any more than, say, 120 seconds. So that could also be the issue of that set too high. It might lead to a scenario where you're getting gateway errors intermittently or under high load. But yeah, troubleshoot with Query Monitor. Look in Google Search Console. Let me just show you quickly. So have a look at how Google is crawling the website. We have other videos about this, and I'll just go here. So if you go under settings and then under crawl stats, I think it is, yeah. You'll see how Google is crawling the site here. So you just want to go through and fix any errors, particularly like 404 errors. So just go through and just have a look at what it's getting 404 errors on. If it's getting a lot, like there's nothing here, it's 33, it's not a big deal. But if you're in the thousands here, that could be an issue. Or if there's other weird things Google is trying to crawl. Also under the pages section here, go through this and have a look if it's getting weird things it's trying to crawl, particularly under these canonical sections. There's a lot of detail to go into here, and we have other videos on it, but you want to kind of control Google crawling. If it's crawling stuff it shouldn't be crawling, then you want to block that in the robots.txt file. Lastly, use a CDN, so we'd say use Cloudflare and with their APO service. So that'll offload a lot of the workload from the hosting off to the content delivery network. And also, it just basically frees up the hosting to do only things the hosting can do. So that's a general way to reduce the load, and particularly the APO service will reduce the load dramatically. That's pretty much it. So we'll keep this video short, but that's kind of like the quick run through of 504 errors, what the cause is, some steps to troubleshoot and fix them. If you get stuck, our team can help out. This is something we do a lot of work with. So if you just go to wpspeedfix.com, we have a few options there. Like I said, we have some free tools here: free SEO audit, free speed test, free core web vitals report. There's no opt-in required for any of those. They're all free. Take about 90 seconds to run, and they'll help you troubleshoot some of this stuff. And if you're looking for paid help, fill out this audit request on the front of the website and tell us what you're looking for or what your problem is, and we'll come back to you generally within 1 business day or so. I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions or need anything clarified, just post in the comments and we'll come back to you. Cheers.